When it comes to communication, most of the worst outcomes I've had in my life are because of things I said. And I've often regretted things that I said, but I have never regretted listening too much or listening too carefully. Listening is the most important communication skill, not speaking. And in this video, I'm going to give you 4 principles for effective listening. Hi everybody, I'm Bruce Lambert from How Communication Works. This is a channel where I teach you about communication skills so you can improve your relationships, succeed at work, and be more confident. Okay, let's get into these 4 principles. Principle number 1, prepare your mind and the environment. So think of this as like internal preparation and external preparation. Both are important. In terms of external preparation, what you really want to do is control distractions. Find a quiet place, find a comfortable place. Put away your phone, turn off all your notifications, close all your screens, turn off the television, turn off the music. Create an external environment which is conducive to focusing on the person that you're listening to. In fact, more than just turning off notifications, put away your phone. There's scientific evidence that the mere presence of a visible phone decreases the quality of conversation. So put away your phone, prepare a quiet, conducive external environment. By the way, if you like my teaching style, I'm preparing a course on listening called The Listening Leap. And there's information about it in a link in the description and the cards and the end screen. If you go to that link at listeningleap.com, you will find a free 10-page PDF listening guide that captures what I think are some of the core principles of good listening and will put you on the waiting list for when the listening course is ready. The second part of preparation is internal preparation. I think this is probably even more important than the preparation of a conducive external environment. And that is prepare yourself to be receptive. So that means trying to reduce the internal distractions, calm yourself, make sure you're capable of focusing, make sure you're well rested and you've had something to eat and you've had something to drink and so on. But also put aside whatever issues that might be on your mind for the moment while you're listening and set an intention to be curious, to be open-minded, to be non-judgmental, and to devote your full attention to the person that you're listening to. This is easier said than done. I'll be the first to admit it. And a lot of the times I'm distracted by a digital device. I'm preoccupied by thoughts about work or my personal life or goodness knows what. And instead of focusing on the person, I'm focused on this internal stimuli. So we've got to quiet those in order to make a commitment to listen to the person that we're talking to. When the conversation is going to be difficult, this also means trying to control our own biases, trying to let go of our preconceived notions, our preconceived judgments about the person, about what they're going to say, about how we feel, and also trying to regulate our own emotions. I've said in other videos that I think emotional regulation is probably the primary communication skill, because no matter how good a communicator you are, if you're extremely emotionally agitated, you're not going to be able to perform at your highest level of skill. So get yourself regulated. If you're really not regulated, if you're extremely upset or tired or frustrated or angry or whatever, it's probably not a good time to have a conversation where you're going to be trying to listen well. So internal and external preparation, that's principle number 1. Principle number 2, focus on understanding, not on preparing a response. You may have heard of the quote from Stephen Covey, who wrote a book called 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, where he says, listen first to understand. And that's what this principle is all about. Focus on understanding, not on getting your point across. And the paradox or the irony of this is, if you focus on understanding as the first principle, then you are eventually going to have a better opportunity to get your point across, because most people are not capable and willing to listen carefully to your point of view until they've been heard. And you might think, well, I should be heard first and so on. But in the spirit of good listening, you have to sort of be generous and be willing to understand first. And then if you make the person really feel seen and heard and understood, they'll be much more willing to give you an opportunity to say your piece. So what does this mean? First, defer judgment and avoid interruption. You may think you know what they're going to say. You may be tempted to finish their sentences. You may think you've heard it all before from this particular person, but try to set that aside. That's part of your emotional preparation from step 1. Let people finish. Don't finish their sentences. You might think you're being cooperative, but it's just a kind of interruption. Don't interrupt. let them completely say their say. You can say, say things like that, but don't interrupt and don't formulate your response while they're still talking. It's so tempting to do that, and I do it too. But what we really want to do is try to be in a receptive mode. And then when they're done talking, we can pause and take time to formulate our own response. Second, listen to the entire message, not just the verbal message. Now, there's some people who say, nonverbal communication is 95% of all communication. All that is nonsense. Both verbal and nonverbal communication are important. It's essentially impossible to quantify the exact amount of information that's conveyed in each channel. Let's just say all of it is important. So there's the words, but then there's posture, gesture, facial expression, pitch, rate, and volume, timing, interpersonal spacing. All of that is nonverbal, and it carries a lot of information. So we want to listen to not just the words, but also the music to get all the information that we can. So try to grasp the entire message, verbal and nonverbal. And the third principle of focusing on understanding is, in a formal setting, this is not as appropriate in an informal setting, but in a formal setting, take notes. So one way of capturing and focusing on understanding in a more formal, in a business setting, in a school setting, is to take notes. So that's principle number 2, focus on understanding, not responding. Principle number 3, engage actively to verify understanding. So first, use back channel cues or active encouragers. That's just, oh, yeah, right, I see. All that stuff just tells the person, I'm here, I'm listening, I'm paying attention, and it encourages them to continue. And this includes nonverbal encouragers. So nodding, all this smiling, making eye contact, all of these things encourage the speaker to keep talking, and they signal to the speaker that they have your full attention. The second, ask questions. Listening is not a purely passive act. You may have often heard the phrase active listening. That means many different things, but one of the things that it means is that we should participate while we're listening. And the most important way to participate, in addition to these active encouragers like is to ask open-ended questions. That means ask questions that cannot be answered with a yes or no, or even just say, tell me more, or can you tell me more, or questions that start with what, or how, or who, or when. Why questions like, why did you do that, sometimes seem a little confrontational or aggressive. I'm not saying never use them. Sometimes it's useful and important to say, wow, why did they say that? Or why do you think that happened? What we really want to do is invite elaboration. So curiosity is the thing that's motivating us when we're listening. So be prepared to ask questions to invite people to say more. And third, paraphrase and summarize. This is one of the most important and valuable listening techniques. So we're listening, we're focusing, we're asking open-ended questions. And then when there's a pause, instead of responding with our point of view, we just take the opportunity to summarize and paraphrase in our own words what they said. And the idea, Chris Voss in his book, Never Split the Difference, says the goal of paraphrasing is to get a that's right. So that means you paraphrase so completely and so accurately that when you're done paraphrasing, the person just looks at you and says, that's right. You got it all. So these 3 things, use encouragers, ask open-ended questions, and paraphrase and summarize. That's principle 3, engage actively to understand. And finally, principle number 4, responding thoughtfully and respectfully. So here's the part of listening where we get to actually respond. So one of the first things you can do when responding thoughtfully and respectfully is pause. Just pause. You're taking the time to think about and fully absorb what's just been said. And since while the other person was talking, you were focused on them, you actually didn't have time to formulate your response. So when they're done talking, you can pause and think about what they've said and think about your summary. And if you're taking notes, refer to your notes. And this pause lets you gather your thoughts, and it also signals to the other person how seriously you are taking them and how seriously you're taking your response. Second, take one last opportunity before you respond to paraphrase again or summarize again, to share your understanding, to make sure you've understood what they said. So one of your first responses can be just a checking, a validation, a verification that you understood what they said. And sometimes what I would do when a student would come to my office and they'd be very concerned about something that was happening in class, and I would let them talk for a very long time. And then when they were done talking and they seemed to want my response, before I would respond, I would say, what else? Is there anything else that I need to know about this situation? Is there anything else that I need to understand? And I would say this often after paraphrasing or summarizing. So make sure that you validate your understanding before you respond. And then finally, you can say your piece. And since this is mostly a video about listening, I'm not going to talk about how to present your side of things. I can talk about that. And I have talked about that in a lot of other videos on my channel. But then you can, you've formulated your response, and now they should be much more open to listening to you, and you can say your piece. And in the long run, one of the things you want to do is to seek feedback about your listening. You can do this in the course of the current interaction, or subsequently you could say, did I hear everything that you were saying? Did you get a chance to say everything you were saying? Did you feel like you were being heard and understood? And get that feedback. And ultimately, all these 4 principles are important, but there's even a higher level kind of meta principle that you want to try to master. And that is to have a real-time awareness of how well you're listening in the moment. Because, look, all of us are imperfect, myself included. I often say that I teach these skills not because I've perfected them, but because I also need to learn them and improve on them. And one of the things that I try to do is be conscious of how well I'm listening. And sometimes, I can remember just the other night, I was listening to someone, trying to listen to someone, but honestly, I was on my phone, I was thinking about something else. They said something to me, and I didn't even really hear them. And I was conscious of how poorly I was listening in that moment. I put down my phone, I apologized, and then I refocused on the interaction. So if we can have this meta-level awareness of how well we're doing, it allows us to correct and change course in real time. So there you have it, 4 principles for effective listening. If you put these into practice, I think your relationships will improve. You can be a better leader at work. You can resolve conflict more effectively. You can have deeper friendships in your interpersonal life, and so on. And if you like the way I'm teaching, I'm developing a course specifically dedicated to listening. There's a link in the description. There's a link in the cards and the end screen. So please visit listeningleap.com and check out the information about my new listening course, including a free 10-page PDF listening guide. It's a great way to help support the channel. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.